What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you. As always, it is Wednesday, February 5th. Horrible, horrible start to February, man. I apologize. Yesterday, I felt like I was not even far off with my handicapping in most of those games, basically all of them, and they pretty much all fell on the wrong side. I mean, we started off with Central Michigan with a loss. I mean, obviously, I'm fine with losses. I just want to win on the day, as I can't adjust my mic here. Central Michigan put themselves in a big early hole, but they got out of it, and they were winning in the second half, blew that lead, and then it was tied like down the stretch, and they just wound up falling short and losing the game. Meanwhile, Dallas Mavs, one of my only wins, they covered, but they were winning that game outright for a while. They could have had the money line cash somewhat easily, I think, and they didn't do that, although at least they got the cover. So I'm like, all right, I'm 1-1. That's not too bad. Meanwhile, hockey has just been ice cold. Vegas, they're in the game the whole time, and it's like, all right, you get down to a point where it's a 1-1 game, and you got the better team. Like, they should get out of there with the win, the better team in the better spot. No, they lose 2-1. So I had two hockey losses, each by a goal yesterday. My camera will not focus, so you're going to have to deal with me being unfocused, just in general, mentally and on screen. And then the rest of the college basketball, I mean, what did I even have in college basketball? I don't even remember, man, but I know like Arizona State, well, Wisconsin won, so that was good. That was a pretty easy win. They almost blew the cover after they were winning by like 20 points. They let it slip a little bit, but they still won, I think, by 12. Then Northwestern winning the whole game, Northwestern, and that line was up to 3.5 when the game went off, and I had 2. That game, like a no-doubter for Northwestern. They were winning the whole game by a decent margin. Then the margin just starts trickling away, and then all of a sudden it's tied, and they wind up winning by exactly 2. So it's a push. Just extremely frustrating. That should have been a win easy. They were winning by 12, 13 points with like 6 minutes left in the game. I mean, give me a break, man. Meanwhile, I lost the other NBA play. The Toronto Raptors missed by a half point. I mean, they were losing the game, but they were just hanging in there. It was enough that it looked like they were going to get within that number at the end, and they missed by a half point. They lose by 6. I don't know if there might have been 6s out there, and there might have been 1.5s on Northwestern. Maybe those both could have been wins. Man, it is so frustrating to have every game like being that close. And then Arizona State was out to an 18-2 early lead, and I'm thinking, all right, they're going to run away with this thing. Nope. Then they're losing before halftime, and then they wind up losing the game right at the end. They had chances to win the game. They lose by 1 at the end, and I just need them to win by 2, I think. That line was up to like 3, I think, when the game went off. 2.5, 3, and I had 1.5. So I beat the number on Northwestern, on Arizona State, and on BYU. That line was up to like 3, 3.5 when that went off, and I had them at 1.5. And they don't win either. It's just unbelievably frustrating. And then the late hockey game, Seattle, yeah, I know they were losing. They were losing late, down 2 goals late. They were within 1 goal for a lot of it. Down 2, they actually tied the game in the final like several minutes, and then still lost in overtime. It's, yeah, just unbelievable. Hockey has gone completely ice cold on the ice. 2 losses by 1 goal. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about any of that. I think that was all the games. I was 2-6-1 yesterday, and it could have easily been significantly better than that if a couple of them had just fallen like a couple of points or a couple of plays differently. It's just insane, man. Those are the types of nights that you hate. And now I'm losing on the year after I won January. This has been the worst start to a month that I can remember, man. It makes you like not even want to do this anymore. It's so frustrating. Especially when you think you basically handicap these things right and then they lose. I don't know what else to say about it. And I think Vegas had a completely dominant like shot differential in their game, and they still lost as the better team, losing 2-1. I think the Islanders only had like, I don't know, like 18 shots maybe to Vegas's like 30 something, and it's not because Vegas was losing the whole game. Like, how do you lose a game when you have that much of a shot differential? It's just ridiculous. Like outlier goalie performances. That wasn't the case in the Seattle game, by the way. Let's get into these games today. We got a decent college basketball slate. I am not restraining myself. I think I have maybe 7 college basketball plays. Let's get into it. 2 of them are right away. I don't even want to get into the Ken Palm numbers because it just takes way too long. I have plays in both of the 6 p.m. games. I just think they're both decent situations. First game up, I'm going to play Holy Cross plus 4.5. I know they're a terrible team. Yeah, they are. Army, I just think the spot is really bad for Army. I mean, Army just beat Colgate, who was the class of this conference for who knows how long in the Patriot League. They continually win that conference. Colgate's still one of the top teams in the conference, taking a little bit of a step back. Huge win for Army over Colgate. Then they went on the road and they played American, who's at the top of the conference. Pretty close game, man. I mean, yeah, Army was losing most of this game, but this game was close. It was a one-possession game in the final minute. Army falls just short in that game. Now they have to come back home and play Holy Cross, who they already beat on the road at Holy Cross. So it's one of those in-season second matchups where it's a little bit of road revenge. When you have, again, an avenging road conference underdog is a good way to look. But on top of that being the case, it is a sandwich spot because look who Army has next. Yeah, they got Bucknell up next, who is all of a sudden like one of the teams that may actually win this conference. They're right behind Army. They're tied with Army in conference record. So I think this is a sandwich spot. Holy Cross way down at the bottom of the conference. Already beat them once in their place in Worcester, Mass. I don't think Army's going to pay total attention to this. And Holy Cross has lost a bunch of games in a row. They've lost 3 home games in a row, which, I mean, yeah, that does mean maybe they're not that good at home, but one was to American, the best team in the conference, and I played American in that game, if I remember correctly. I think I did, or maybe I played American in the first game. I don't remember. I did play them once against Holy Cross. It might have been the one at American, but still, I think it was not a great spot, really, for Holy Cross in either of those. Holy Cross was coming off a tough game against Bucknell the last time they played, American at home there, so I think it's just bad. And then, they lost at home to, Army, like I said, and Army is one of the better teams in this conference this year, too. So, even though Army does like to speed the game up, it is possible that Holy Cross is able to kind of slow this game down a little bit. It's at least a little bit easier for the lesser team and the road team to slow it down if that's the way they play. But I just think it's a bad spot for Army. It is that avenging road underdog spot. I'll play the really ugly dog there in Holy Cross. Next game up is another game I'm playing. Another ugly dog, VMI +7, Virginia Military Institute. Hey, at least the military, I'm playing against one military institute and I'm playing on another one. At least you know the military institutes are disciplined, right? East Tennessee State, I think, is in a pretty bad spot as well. This is a similar spot to that first game. They just played 3 big games in a row against like the class teams of this conference, which East Tennessee is also one of the top teams in this conference in the SoCon. They played a close game, lost to Chattanooga, went on the road, played another tough game against UNC Greensboro, came back home and beat Furman a few days ago. Now they have to go back out on the road and face VMI, who, by the way, they already beat at home by 15 points. So it's not a road revenge angle here, but it is an angle where VMI might be a team that East Tennessee just totally overlooks. And who do they have up next? Yeah, they got Samford, the team that won the conference and is atop the conference again this year, won it last year, and is probably still the best team in this conference. So I think this is a mega sandwich spot as well with this game, one road game sandwiched in between all these other much bigger opponents, and it's a team that East Tennessee already beat once. Yeah, I'm going to look to VMI here, and VMI has been a doormat in this conference for a while. Them and the Citadel have both been doormats. The Citadel still is, but VMI isn't really anymore. I mean, look at their recent stretch. They've actually won 5 out of their last 6 games, including beating Furman and Wofford, Wofford on the road. Although their other games were against Western Carolina, Citadel. I mean, those aren't good teams. But they played competitively at home against UNC Greensboro as well. They've actually been decent at home. They almost beat UNC Greensboro. They beat Furman at home. Played really close against Mercer at home. Beat Western Carolina, although they suck. So these home results in conference have actually been a lot better than the road results. So VMI has not been that bad of a home team. They have not lost by margin, a margin like this really, I don't think, to anybody at home, as I just said, in conference play. Although they've only had a couple of tough opponents at home, but still, I think this is a horrible spot for East Tennessee. VMI just had a win at Western Carolina to complete the season sweep there. all that win will do, it's not a great win. I mean, Western Carolina sucks, but Western Carolina actually took them into overtime, so maybe it's even a little bit of a scare for VMI. Now they're coming back home, and they did lose their last home game, so they may be in a little bit of bounce back mode, wanting to win that next home game to erase that last home loss, and they got a little bit of momentum, at least, from continuing their win streak there and beating Western Carolina. So I think it's a real bad spot for VMI. So I'm going to grab the points. East Tennessee State's up from 6.5 to 7 with juice. You might be able to get a little bit of a better number on this. I don't agree with that move. I think it's a bad spot for East Tennessee. And then Army has gone up from 4.5 with even money, just to a straight 4.5. Not a huge move there. But if you can get the 7 or even better on VMI, that's what I would look in this game, where I would look in that game. Oregon, Michigan, this is an almost ranked matchup as Oregon just fell out of the rankings. I don't have a play in this, but Oregon coming off that disgusting loss at home. I thought Oregon was definitely in a bounce back spot. I thought they were catching UCLA in a spot where they should have performed better against UCLA, and that they really caught Nebraska in a spot where Oregon should have done a lot better. And inexplicably, Oregon had a horrible game, and I just don't even understand it. Now they're going back out on the road. I think they have to be focused after such an ugly loss, and they're playing a team that took their spot in the rankings, basically, as Oregon just dropped out of the rankings, and now Michigan is up in the rankings, although I think that's deserved. I don't think Oregon is actually a top 25 team. Michigan actually is, but in this spot, you got to think of Oregon as anything left. They're going to want to show up and try to play in this game. Michigan, yeah, they're coming off a little bit of a scare as well against Rutgers, who's not a very good team. Michigan barely got by them, so I don't think Michigan's really in a bad spot either. So I don't want to try to fade Michigan here, but you got to think that Oregon's off such a disgusting loss that they at least got to show up and try to be competitive here. Michigan up from 7.5 to 8 with juice. I do agree that Michigan is the better team, and the thing about that is people might look at this and think, oh, both of these teams have really similar records, good records. That 8.5 does look like a lot of points, but I think it is justified. So in that way, it does look like a misleading line, which will kind of tell you maybe you want to start looking to the Michigan side. I don't know, man. We'll see. Again, I'm not going to play this game. I don't even know if I want to give it a lean on that game. The money looks like it is coming in a little bit on Michigan. So, the clincher for me, if I don't have any situational angles to really look at that I don't think are that strong, I kind of look to the market, but I don't know. And then Milwaukee, I will say, I think they're in a bad spot as they have this another road game. It's a third road game in the last 4 games. They just lost a tough, close game to IPFW, who is right there with them in the Horizon standings. Milwaukee may be the best team in the Horizon, and that was a tough game, tough loss against IPFW. And who do they have up next? Oh, yeah, Cleveland State, who's atop the conference, who they actually did beat earlier this year at home. But that's a big game nonetheless. So they have IUPUI sandwiched in between IPFW and Cleveland State. That is definitely a sandwich spot, and it's on the road, and they already beat IUPUI at home, or IU Indianapolis now, only by 7, but still, it is a team they already beat. It's a sandwich spot, so I could see Milwaukee overlooking IU Indianapolis here, although IU Indianapolis is coming off a big upset win of, I think, double digits probably against Youngstown State, so they're coming off a big win themselves, so I don't really want to try to get involved there. Wisconsin-Milwaukee's laying 10 on the road. My lean would still be to grab the points because I think Milwaukee's in a bad spot, but I'm not touching it. Duke is at Syracuse, laying a ton of points, obviously, but Duke is coming off their huge rivalry where they just smashed North Carolina. The game was less close than the final score even looked. They're actually coming off wins against all 3 North Carolina rivals in a row. Wake Forest, NC State, and North Carolina. Now they have to go up to Syracuse. And they got Clemson up next, and Clemson is probably going to be a tournament team, and they're right behind Duke in conference standings, so that's a big game. So I think this is kind of a sandwich spot for Duke, so I really don't love the spot for Duke, having to go up north to face Syracuse. Are they really going to want to do that? Like, is that really going to be something that's going to focus them? I know Syracuse has the name, but they're just having a real bad season, so I don't see Duke showing up and being totally focused here. Syracuse broke a loss streak with a win at Cal, so they won in an unfamiliar environment in their last game. So not terrible that they were able to have a nice bounce back, break that loss streak. So now at least maybe they have some momentum. They did lose their last game at home. They lost 2 of their last 3 at home, so maybe it means they're not a good home team, but also when you're returning home and you lost your last game at home, it does tend to be more of a focus spot. Duke does like to slow the game down too, so if they try to do that, it's going to be more difficult for them to cover a big number like this as well, especially in a spot where they may not totally be focused. They're down from 18 to 17.5. I lean to taking the points with Syracuse there. I mean, not a play, obviously. We got a ranked matchup here between Missouri and Tennessee in this crazy good SEC this year. Number 15 and number 4. Both teams are coming off real nice wins, too. Missouri just won on the road, a blowout win at Mississippi State. So they just swept the Mississippi teams, and now it's a second straight road game for them. Not a real easy spot for them to be in, really. Riding high, coming off that win, although, of course, they're going to show up and be focused for Tennessee, and Missouri has been a giant killer this year already on the road. They did win at Florida earlier this year, although Florida is a different team, and Florida plays real fast. Tennessee likes to play slow and play really good defense, but Tennessee coming off getting their revenge against Florida, that was a huge win for them, getting that revenge against Florida. They're staying at home, kind of soaking all that in. So I actually think the spot is still a little bit worse for Tennessee, and you know Tennessee's laying points here, and they're a slope-aced defensive team, so I would kind of lean to grabbing the points with Missouri here, but it's not going to be a play, obviously. Tennessee up from 9.5 to 10, 75% of tickets, only 56% of the cash, so they're public. Looks like less of the cash coming in on them, so the early market read does look like maybe taking the points is the right side, especially, again, Tennessee, a slow-down team, maybe won't quite be as easy for them to cover a number like this, especially coming off that huge win. You also got to pay attention to see if Zakai Ziegler is back. Tennessee was actually missing him and one of their other starters in that game against Florida, and it still didn't even matter. Easy win. So you got to see if those guys are coming back. But if they do come back, it kind of becomes a reverse injured player spot again because, hey, they just had a huge, easy win without those guys. So I think that if those guys are coming back, I think it kind of makes the team a little bit kind of complacent almost, even though, yes, this is a ranked team and known giant killer coming into their place. So I don't know, but I think there are more reasons to lean to Tennessee to Missouri, than otherwise. Let's see here. Louisville just lost a huge win streak. And a lot of times when you lose a win streak that's that long and you're not used to losing, that game can kind of knock you for a loop and it can kind of hang you over and you, in essence, lose the game twice. And that might be what we're looking at with Louisville here. And it's a second straight road game. Lost their win streak to Georgia Tech. Now they have to go up to Boston College. I mean, Boston College has been awful in conference. It's not a spot that's really going to draw a team's eye, draw a team's focus, I don't think. And for a Southern team having to go up into the cold, kind of like what I was saying with Duke, having to go up to Syracuse. It's cold up here in Boston right now, man. It's in the 20s. These Southern teams really want to go up there just to have to play a bad basketball team? Probably not. Boston College coming off that miracle win over FSU, though, getting 5 points in like the final couple of seconds or whatever. And they were coming off an overtime game against North Carolina the game before that where they lost and almost pulled off a massive upset on the road there. So BC, I don't love the spot that they're in either. I think maybe it's a little bit of a worse spot for Louisville, and Louisville's laying way too many points in my opinion. So I would still look to grab Boston College, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, they're really a bad team. They're definitely the significantly worse team. Louisville down from 15 to 13, 50% of tickets, 94% of the cash on them, even though despite the cash percentage being on there, it looks like the line has moved down a little bit. So, conflicting market indicators there. The Battle of the Georges, rematch of the Georges in the A-10 here between George Mason and George Washington. George Mason is the better of these two teams. George Mason's won a ton of games in a row. They've won 7 games in a row, and I believe 10 of their last 11 games. I mean, this George Mason team has been on a roll. But they beat George Washington at home, although only by 3. They're coming off a road win over Davidson. It's a second straight road game, and they got Rhode Island and then St. Louis coming up after this, and St. Joe's, and who's up after that? VCU, probably the best team in the conference. So it is possible that George Mason doesn't totally pay attention to this George Washington team who started struggling a little bit and who George Mason already beat, and it being a second straight road game for them. So even though George Mason is the better team, and I think George Washington, their record makes them look way better than they actually are. They had a week out of conference schedule. I don't think the spot is that great for George Mason. And George Washington's coming off an ugly loss at LaSalle, who's not a very good team and is close to the bottom of the conference. So I think the spot sets up a little bit better for George Washington. It is a little bit of revenge, even though it isn't road revenge. But that is the way that I would look in that game. George Mason's up from 2.5 to 3 with juice. Don't see real actual market percentages yet on that. It's even 50-50 splits on both. So we'll see what happens with that. All right. Other games that I might want to talk about. Let me see. I forget what other games I'm actually even playing here. I don't want to skip any games that I'm actually playing. Oh, I'll skip. I won't even talk about this game. Wait, I'm playing it. What? No. Loyola Maryland. I mean, they finally broke their recent loss streak with a win over Boston University, BU, and now they're going out to Lafayette, who beat them on their own floor 80-59. So this is definitely a little bit of a road revenge angle for Loyola Maryland. When they know that Lafayette completely embarrassed them on their own floor, you got to think Loyola Maryland is probably going to show up for this one, even though they do have Colgate and then Army and then American all coming up next. So they do have 3 huge games coming up next. So this is a Loyola Maryland team down in the dumps here, and they might want revenge against this Lafayette team that isn't even good and completely embarrassed them. And Lafayette just beat Colgate, who, as I keep saying, is the class of the conference. They were coming off a close loss to American the game before that. I think I actually lost on Lafayette in that game. They played a good game in that one, too, and just fell short. Beating Colgate again, huge deal in this conference because Colgate has just dominated this conference for so long. And that was a little bit of a road revenge angle for them as well because they got crushed by Colgate at home. So this sets up to be a spot where you want to look to fade Lafayette in this one. So I looked to Loyola Maryland in this one. This did not make my card. Lafayette's up from 3.5 to 4. I lean to taking the points with Loyola Maryland in that one. As I said, I think the spot is better for them, but they do have maybe a look ahead with a bunch of big games up next. And then American is at Bucknell. This is going to be an interesting one as these are now kind of the 2 contenders to maybe win this conference at this point. American already beat Bucknell at home by 10, but now they're going out on the road. They've won a bunch of games in a row. They just beat Army. So now it's a second straight big game, having to go out on the road. Bucknell doesn't look like a good team as their overall record is bad, but Bucknell did have a little bit of a more difficult out-of-conference schedule, having to face Gonzaga, Maryland, Kentucky was in there. I mean, not the easiest out-of-conference schedule there. They're coming off an easy win over Navy, really. So the line is actually telling you these teams are closer than what their overall records might make them look. So it might look a little bit too easy to grab American as an underdog here, even though Bucknell's down a little bit from 1.5 with juice to the 1.5 straight. I would slightly lean to look into the Bucknell side in that one, and it is a little bit of in-season revenge as well, but that one is definitely not going to be a play. But we'll see how that goes. What is a play is Northern Kentucky plus 1.5, even though I know this one I'm bucking KenPom a little bit. I wasn't with the other two. His numbers are right in line with those. His number here has Cleveland State as a significantly better team, and he has them winning by like 3 or 4 points, but I don't care. I think this is a terrible spot for Cleveland State, and I'm going to fade them. And it looks like a total misleading line here, right? Like, how is this basically a pick-the-winner situation when you have a 17-6 team with 1 conference loss up against a below 500 team? Well, again, that's because the odds makers are telling you these teams are not quite what they appear. KenPom does have Cleveland State as being one of the most lucky teams in the country, and I don't think they're the best team in the horizon. I think Milwaukee probably is. Cleveland State is one of the best, but I don't think they're as good as they look, and they're coming off pounding IPFW, a huge game, because IPFW was the team closest to them in the horizon standings. Big win over IPFW, and who do they have up next? Oh, yeah, they got Milwaukee and then Robert Morris and then Youngstown, who are all the other best teams in this conference. So you want to talk about a sandwich spot. Yeah, this is a sandwich spot, sandwiched in between all of the other top teams in the conference here, literally. So I don't think this is a good spot at all, even though Cleveland State is a train. They haven't lost since they lost at Milwaukee, whenever this was. They haven't lost since December 5th, I know. I'm stepping in front of this ridiculous train here. Cleveland State has won all the rest of their games in conference after that. So I know they're not used to losing, but, I mean, they've been beating up on a somewhat weak conference. This is now a spot where I think they could get caught. It's the second straight road game. They already beat Northern Kentucky at home by 18 points, so I don't really think they're going to totally pay attention here. And I do think Cleveland State also likes to speed the game up, whereas Northern Kentucky is going to want to slow this game down, I believe. I didn't want to look at KenPom that significant. Actually, I'm wrong. Both teams play slow, but he does have Cleveland State at 18th in luck. So he does have Cleveland State as being one of the luckiest teams in the nation. Northern Kentucky, they just broke a long loss streak. They had lost 6 games in a row to some of the best teams in the conference for the most part, though, including that one to Cleveland State. They finally won on the road at Oakland. Now they're coming back home, and I think they're going to be very focused with the team atop the conference who already kind of embarrassed them once coming into their place. And the last time they were at home, they've lost 3 home games in a row. So I think they're going to really be very, very focused in this game, man. And I think Cleveland State may not be. So I think you have a big-time focus disparity here. So I'm going to grab Northern Kentucky, and it looks very misleading to do so. Cleveland State's down from 2 to 1.5. Does look like they have 56% of the cash on them right now with 67% of tickets on Northern Kentucky. Highly doubt that that is the case because no public bettor is going to look at this game and go, oh, give me Northern Kentucky in this pick the winner situation. I will do that, though. Andrew, what's up, man? Haley Steinfeld, yeah, she's hot. They should show her on TV for sure. But she doesn't want the limelight, man, the spotlight. She's not an attention whore like Taylor Swift apparently is. So that's what you got there. What else we got? What else am I even playing here? I don't want to talk about every one of these games, but let me see. I mean, Furman, I think, is probably in a bad spot, if I recall. They just lost. They beat Samford and then lost to East Tennessee, and they got Chattanooga up next. And they already beat Western Carolina by almost 30 points on the road. So this is a road revenge spot for Western Carolina, and it's a sandwich spot that Furman is in. But, man, I mean, I'm not going to try to do that. I mean, Western Carolina is so much worse than Furman. Furman up from 15.5 to 17. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Western Carolina hangs within that number because it is a terrible spot for Furman. But I'm not going to put my money on a team as bad as Western Carolina against a team that's actually quite good. Even though I know I'm playing against some bad teams today, but mostly against other bad teams. Next up, Southern Illinois is a play for me. Let's try to get this done quick, man. Southern Illinois, let's go. They're coming off a loss to Drake, I know, which is a big game, and that was close for a while, but they started really falling short. I mean, within the final, several minutes of the game, they were kind of out of the game. So even though it was a big game, I don't think that's going to be a type of game that's going to hang them over, really, whereas Evansville, I think, is not only the worst of the two teams, but they're in a bad spot here. They've looked good recently with 3 straight wins. They just beat Belmont on the road, which is a big win, 10.5-point upset for Evansville. That's a crazy upset over Belmont, and Belmont had beaten them in their own house only by 3, so maybe Evansville matches up decently against Belmont, but that was a crazy upset win. Now they get Southern Illinois, who, by the way, they already beat on the road by 15, so it's a road revenge angle for Southern Illinois as well. And Evansville has Bradley up next in 3 days, which is a huge game. Bradley, one of the teams that top this conference. So I think this is a bad spot for Evansville. I think it's a sandwich spot of a huge road upset, playing a team they already beat on their own floor, and with a huge game up next against one of the class teams in the conference. Terrible spot for Evansville. And Southern Illinois, like I said, they are actually the better team here, even though the records might not totally tell you that that's the case, but the odds makers are telling you that is the case, with Southern Illinois only being a 1-point underdog here on the road, which does mean that they lost as a favorite at home as well. That means Evansville upset them. Evansville's up from a pick'em to 1, so it looks like the line's moved on Evansville a little bit. I do not agree with that at all, obviously. I think the situation sets up to be a play on Southern Illinois. We get into the second of road matchups here. Give me Southern Illinois in that one. Let's keep going, baby. We got too many games here. Illinois is at Rutgers. I don't know about this game, man. I'm not playing this. Illinois, nice win over Ohio State in their last game. Now they got to go back out on the road. They have been a little bit worse on the road for the most part than they have been at home, although they actually had some nice road wins on the Pacific Coast earlier. Rutgers, both of these teams actually like to play fast, but Illinois is certainly the better team. Rutgers, not very good. KenPom has Rutgers down in the 70s, although he does actually have them as being undervalued as well. But Rutgers is coming off a big performance against Michigan, where they came pretty close to pulling off a home upset of Michigan. So that was a big game for them. Now they're having to turn around and play an Illinois team that's going to run the floor against them. Doesn't look like the greatest spot to me for either team. I mean, the market read would put you on grabbing the points with Rutgers. Illinois is up from 6.5 to 8. 75% of the tickets on them, but 80% of the cash on Rutgers. So it looks like there is a big cash disparity coming in on the Rutgers side, but I'm not touching this game. Creighton at Providence. Creighton, I mean, they're coming off that win on the road at Villanova. They're already on the East Coast, but it's a second straight road game now, and they got Marquette, UConn, St. John's all up next. So the top 3 teams in the conference all coming up next. Huge games. They might overlook this Providence team, and they already beat Providence at home by 20 points. Coming off that game against Villanova, second straight road game. Huge games coming up next. Bad spot for Creighton. The problem is, I can't play Providence because Providence is coming off that real close call against St. John's. They played really well against St. John's, so I don't know how they're going to respond to this. Although besides that, it does look like a bad situation for Creighton, so I do still lean to taking the points with Providence. Providence is also going to try to slow the game way down and ugly it up, which is what you want kind of with a home underdog, where Creighton likes to try to play fast. Villanova was able to slow it down against them, even though Creighton still won the game. They only won by 2. Creighton, 3.5, laying 3.5, 80% of tickets, 97% of the cash on Providence. So Providence does have some of the cash on them. Let's see. Next up, Texas -7 is actually a play for me. I told you I was going to do this. I mean, this is simple. Arkansas just pulled off that huge win. John Calipari returned to Kentucky, and Arkansas pulled off the massive upset. I played Arkansas in that game because Kentucky was off the upset over Tennessee, which I was also on. Back when I was actually winning college basketball games, Kentucky pulled off that huge upset for me, and then Arkansas pulled off the huge upset back against them. Huge win for Arkansas. Now they have to go to Texas. Second straight road game, and Texas is new to the SEC, so Arkansas is not really used to going to this venue, at least, even though it's not really that far from Arkansas, but going to Austin, Texas, not something they usually do. And they got Alabama up next in 3 days, who's number 3 in the country and one of the best teams in this conference as well, one of the best teams in the country as well. So this looks like a pretty major sandwich spot to me. I don't like it at all. Texas is the better team here, even though they've very much struggled offensively a lot of times. But Texas just pulled off a nice confidence-boosting win, even though it was a blowout. I don't think they're going to be overconfident off of that win against LSU. Now they're coming back home where they have played pretty well on this floor. They did have the huge comeback against Texas A&M. The last time they were at home, they beat Missouri at home when I was on Texas in that one. They played pretty close against Auburn and Tennessee on this floor as well. Didn't play horribly against UConn at home either. So Texas has been quite good on this floor. They are the better team. They don't really have any other big games coming up. They're returning home here, which is not a bad spot really in college basketball. Arkansas is in the terrible spot, and that's the reason for this. Lay the points with Texas, -7 in that one. They're definitely the better of the two teams. And then 2 more plays, man, and then I might have to get out of here and then do what I did yesterday and come back in the evening and give you, I have 3 NBA plays tonight. Colorado State is going to be a play for me as well against New Mexico. I just think this is a letdown spot for New Mexico, man. That was a massive win. That was like a win of the year type of scenario, winning on the road at Utah State, and not only winning, but blowing them to pieces, beating them by almost 20 points and taking over the top spot in the Mountain West. Yeah, I know Colorado State's been on fire recently, and they are the worst team against New Mexico. And Colorado State likes to try to slow the game down, and New Mexico is going to try to speed it way up. So it's not a good pacing matchup for Colorado State, but I just think this is such a letdown spot for New Mexico. That was their win of the year, man. Beating Utah State, huge win for them to take over the top spot in the conference, man. And basically that was like their legitimizer win as far as like, we are the best team in this conference, not you. Huge win. Colorado State, I mean, they've at least been playing real well recently. They've won 4 games in a row, 7 of their last 8, 9 of their last 11, mostly against bad teams, but they've been playing pretty well. They just got another easy win over Air Force. They're going out on the road. I understand it's a difficult place to go. I know they have San Diego State and Utah State up next, but it's not like they're going to overlook New Mexico. I mean, New Mexico being atop the conference. They're going into the pit. Not an easy place to play. It is a big home court advantage here, but I just think New Mexico may be laying a few too many points now. with how they've been playing recently. They're up from 8.5 to 8.5 with juice. They're in 9s out there right now. So if Colorado State is able to kind of try to slow this game down a little bit, I don't know if they will totally be able to, but New Mexico's in such a major letdown spot. It might be feeling so high on themselves right now. Colorado State may be able to get this game slowed down enough that they're able to make this a competitive game, and that's what I'm banking on. And by the way, this is a road revenge angle too, because Colorado State lost at home by 8 to New Mexico already. Yeah, they played decently in that game, losing by 8. Colorado State was actually a favorite in that game. So the odds makers are telling you these teams aren't separated by that much. And if Colorado State was a favorite in that game, then how are they a 9-point underdog in this one? It seems like a more fair line would be maybe about like 7 or so. I mean, 9, again, it seems like you're definitely not getting value on the New Mexico side there. So that's that. And then to finish this off, I'm also going to play Washington plus the points. I think Nebraska is in a terrible spot as well, pulling off multiple big games, multiple big wins against ranked teams, beating Illinois, and then going out on the road. I thought it was a horrible letdown spot for Nebraska. Unfamiliar venue, and they somehow just easily beat Oregon. I don't know what is up with that. Knocking them out of the rankings. You got to think Nebraska's going to be feeling real nice and high on themselves now. Now they're facing a second straight road game, second straight unfamiliar venue, because these teams are new to the new to the Big Ten, coming over from the Pac-12. They have to go up to Seattle. Second straight game on the Pacific Coast. Not easy to do, especially when you pulled off a huge win in the first game. Washington's at the bottom of this conference, so it's not like they're a team that's going to really draw your focus. And Nebraska does have Ohio State and Maryland up next, and those are teams that are above them in the conference. Those are bigger games than this Washington game, man. So I think this is a letdown spot. I think this is a sandwich spot. Washington, I know they were just out in the Midwest and they're returning home, but that was a win that broke a huge loss streak for them. Although they lost to all good teams in that stretch to Illinois, Michigan State, Michigan, Purdue, Oregon, UCLA, who's now ranked as well. They lost to all ranked teams in that whole span. So Washington getting that win against Minnesota is good for them because it breaks that losing momentum. I think that's going to help propel them with some confidence going forward. I like how this sets up for Washington in this game, man. People are going to look and say, oh, well, wait a minute. Washington lost to Oregon by double digits, although it was on the road. Well, yeah, both of these games are at Oregon. What am I saying? Nebraska went into Oregon and beat them. So this is so easy. It's just pick the winner. Nebraska looks so easy to take, right? Because they just won at Oregon, who crushed Washington at Oregon. So, like, what gives? It's so easy. Pick the winner. Obviously, it's going to be Nebraska, right? No, I don't agree. Nebraska is definitely worse on the road than they are at home, as most teams are. Washington's been decent at home, man. I mean, they beat their rival Washington State at home. They beat Maryland at home. Pretty nice win. They played Illinois real close at home. Played Purdue fairly respectably at home as well. Played UCLA to within 5. So, I mean, this Washington team, I mean, except for that, like, really inexplicable game against USC at home, which maybe it was because it was coming off the big UCLA game, I don't know. But aside from that, they've been pretty competitive at home, man. They've been decent at home. Bad spot for Nebraska. I'm going to take Washington. Nebraska's up from 1 to 1.5. Washington, 80% of the tickets, 90% of the cash. Highly doubt it. They're not going to be public here, man. So I will grab the points with Washington. And I'll be back tonight. I'll give you my plays now, and I don't know if these lines are going to move or not. 3 plays in the NBA are the Pistons +5, T-Wolves -10.5, and Orlando +5. I'll be back with another evening show and give you a little bit of analysis on that, and hopefully it's not as long as it was yesterday, and hopefully it goes way better than yesterday did. That's going to do it for me, man. And my plays in college, one more time. Holy Cross +4.5, VMI +7, Northern Kentucky +1.5, Southern Illinois +1, Texas -7, Colorado State +9. I know I have no restraint. Washington +1.5. Tower Gang Toad, patreon.com/Tower Gang. We're on tonight, 9:11 p.m. Eastern. Subscribe to the Patreon. You get live pre-show, post-show. I'll be back, baby. Let's get some wins. Peace.